Yo, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Street Coder Nate, and I got another one, a dope one for y'all today. It's our introduction to JavaScript. Let's tap in, y'all. So, first, look, I'm just gonna talk about JavaScript real quick. Like, what is JavaScript used for? Like, why are we even asking, adding it to our website? Our website's already kind of complicated with the HTML and CSS. Now we gotta add another language to it. Yup, a whole nother language, JavaScript. But honestly, like, this is the fun part. This is where you really getting down to the nitty gritty with computer science. Like, before, that other stuff really wasn't computer science. That was like, honestly, a first grader could do it. You could just put stuff on the page, learn how to add color to that stuff and move it around the screen. Anybody can do that. Now, when it comes to this processing stuff of how do I think of things abstractly, how do I compute outcomes, this is where we get into the realm of actual computer science. JavaScript gives us that introduction. So, without further ado, let's hop into the JavaScript. Okay, so what you will see right here is just a basic HTML file. I got my title right there, intro to JS, quick intro, and then you see in the body tag, there's just an H1 tag up in the body. So what am I doing with just H1 tag in the body? We take a look at here, we see, refresh, we got our H1 tag in the body, and that's just about it. And we know this is the right one because it says JS quick intro, JS quick intro. So, yep, this is it. Why did I just do a H1 with no information in it? Like, let's first put like, what up though, or something like that. Come over here. Okay, that's the H1. It works. All right, cool. So, but I don't want to put the H1 there. And the reason I don't want to put the H1 there is because I'm about to show y'all how we can do that with JavaScript. How I could just throw an H1 right here, and then come back to this web page right here. Let's refresh it, and there's nothing there right now. But when I add the JavaScript, how is it going to be added? There will be something there, and you will see it. So in order to add JavaScript to your HTML, there's two ways to do it. The quick way is adding a script tag like this, and then writing any JavaScript that you need in between these script tags. This is doing the JavaScript inside the file. Now, this can get cumbersome because, as you'll find out, your JavaScript is going to be a lot of damn code. So people and developers remove our JavaScript files or remove our JavaScript code from the internal HTML file, and then we put it in our own JavaScript files. So the way where we put our JavaScript is inside the assets, just like the styles. And so we come here, we right click, let's go new file, and we'll just say index.js. It's kind of convention. Index.js, cool. We now have a JavaScript file. I need to link this JavaScript file inside my index.html. I need to link to this JavaScript file. And so the way that we do the link is actually we still do a script tag, but we do a source on our script tag. We give the script tag a source, and the source is just the URL, the path link, or the link to the HTML or to the index file. So I'm just gonna say // remember that means this current directory that the index.html file is in, and if we come here, the index.html file is on the same directory or on the same level as the assets directory, and then inside the assets directory there's the index.js file, and now if I click on this, it should take me to the index.js file as it did. Cool. So let's save that. So now I just linked my index.js file. Let's see if what up though shows up. Nope, still doesn't show up. Why is it not showing up? Well, first, let's go to the index.js file. Not doing nothing. I'm about to do some wild stuff right now that y'all probably not going to understand right away. But through the videos that follow, you're going to understand this ridiculously easily. And actually, I'm probably going to try to explain it in this video to give you an understanding of what happened. But right off the top, I'm going to create a variable, and I'm going to call that variable well, I used the keyword called let. We'll get into that. Let. This is how you create variables. So let's call this one H1 elements equal and so I said I'm going to create a variable, and what a variable is in JavaScript is kind of like a reference. It allows us to reference some data. And then basically this like point to some data. Let's say there's just a bunch of data, a group of data somewhere, and I put a name to that data so that I can always refer back to that data. That's what a variable is. It's like, so now I can go tell you about the name. I'll say like, let's say this data is about chips, right? And like it's some like salty chips or something. So I say, yo, there's some salty chips right there. I'm pointing at a bag of chips that are salty. Those are the bag of chips, the salty bag of chips is the data, and then me giving it the name, let's say salty bag of chips, is me giving it a reference. I just created a reference to that bag of chips and called it a salty bag of chips. Now anyone who's using or thinking about using that bag of chips or looking at the bag of chips, they automatically know first it's salty, two it's a bag of chips. That described the data, that name. What I'm doing here is creating a variable of the same type of caliber. I'm creating h1 element to point to some data. This data that is going to point to is from document.query selector, like this, query selector, and then I just pass in, let's say h1. Cool. So what this does is, well, this part on that part right there, let me move myself a little bit so I can start pointing at this stuff. All right, this part, cool. Yeah, so basically this let h1 element part, that's me declaring the reference. That's me saying salty bag of chips. Now I need to say, what is a salty bag of chips, right? So I said h1 element. I did that in my JavaScript. h1 element, salty bag of chips. What is the salty bag of chips? Well, that pile of stuff over there is the salty bag of chips. Well, what is our h1 element? Our h1 element is this. Comes from the document. Hate pointing. Comes from the document. It's like I'm doing 3D. This way. Okay, cool. It comes from the document, and the document queried itself and selected an h1 element. So what is the document referring to here? This query selector and then h1. What is all of this stuff referring to? Well, this is syntax. This is programmer syntax. If you've never programmed before, this is how programmers declare variables. We give our variable name here, and then we set it equal to something. This equal sign is called the assignment operator. You're basically storing the data inside of this reference, right? And so now every time I say h1 element, it's referring to that data right there. Every time I say salty bag of chips, in my mind I start thinking of that pile of chips that was described as salty, right? Cool. But what is this document.query selector h1? Well, first, let's go back to this index.html. Like I said, inside of this index.html document, I linked to my JavaScript file. So let's go back to the JavaScript file. Inside the JavaScript file, I use this word called document. Well, the reason I can say document is because I have been linked to an actual HTML document file. So when it's talking about document, it's actually talking about this entire document, this entire page, this entire HTML document. Get with me. So it says document. So it calls to the document. The document said, huh? It said document. The document said, what up, though? And the document was like, and then the index.js was like, yo, query selector. So basically the document has different functions. It can perform different actions itself. So this HTML page, JavaScript now allows it to perform different actions on itself. And it says, document, I need you to query yourself. I need you to look. Query means question yourself. Look for some stuff. And it says, what am I looking for? It said, you looking for a query selector. You looking for a query selector. And what does that mean? What is a query selector? Well, let's go back to styles.css. We have these selectors right here, H2, H3. That's selecting a HTML element. We come down here, we got hashtag box3. That is selecting an HTML element with an ID box3. So when I say come over here and I say document.querySelector, well, in a way, CSS was basically doing the same thing here, document.querySelector, but they didn't have to say document. They just said hashtag, and then they said what they selector that they was looking for. And here we say, and so for like H1s, we don't have to say hashtag or dot. For a class, we just say H1 or H2. Well, for here, let's say if we was looking for the H1 element, just as we were doing it over here, over here in the CSS, we was looking for the H1 element, we said H1 comma, and then we could style up the H1 element, right? Well, what if we wanted to grab that same H1 element in the JavaScript? Well, the way that we do that is we tell the document to query select the H1 element. So basically this says document find H1 element. And basically, if this doesn't find the H1 element, then what comes back is this value called null, which is just like nothing. It's like, I can't find nothing. But if it does find something, what comes back is what I'm about to show you in the browser using this thing called console.log. And we're going to log out this H1 element. All right, so console.log, well, what is the console? Well, remember, when I said open up the developer tools, the developer has this this little tab called the console, and in the console we can print out different things pertaining to our website. So I'm about to refresh this page. Bang! I just printed out. It says this came from index.js at line 2. So I can click on that. Index.js at line 2 is this one. Console.log HTML H1 element. What is H1 element? H1 element is document.querySelector H1. So basically, it went to our document, looked for an H1 element, found it, and stored it. It's basically, where is it? Store sources. It stored it inside of this variable called H1. It created a reference to the actual H1 element in our code. That H1 is our data. That's our bag of chips. And now this H1 element is pointing to that. And now we can print it out right here. What else can we do? Not only can we print it out, like we can also manipulate the text that's inside of it. Like this, H1 element dots, let's say inner text, inner HTML, we go inner text equals, and I'm gonna say what up though. So what do you think this is going to do? If I come here and I look at the HTML H1, well, this is a H1 attribute or H1 tag. I know that I have the reference to this H1 tag right here because I grabbed it and I printed it out just a few minutes ago or seconds ago. So now with the H1 element, I'm saying dot inner text. Well, you saw the document dot query selector. So basically what this dot allows us to do is perform actions on what is being referenced. This document right here, that's referencing that actual index.html document. And so when we say document dot, we're saying document dot, and if you see like parentheses after what's the word, so document dot query selector, and then it has parentheses. This one has HTML element dot inner text, but there's no parentheses. If you see a parentheses afterwards, this is an action. So I'm saying document.querySelector H1, I'm saying document, go find me. The action is find. This is an action. Document, go find me the H1 inside of yourself. Now, if I don't put those parentheses, this is what you call a property, an attribute, something that describes the actual thing that is being referenced. So here I have this H1 and I say dot inner text. I'm saying H1. You don't have to find me nothing. You don't have to look for nothing. You don't have to compute anything. What I'm saying is H1. This is basically saying H1 dot skin color. Is basically H1, I'm turning your skin color to black. But instead of saying skin color, we're saying H1 inner text like this, which is saying we go to the H1 element and we're gonna go inside you. This part right here, this is the inner text part. And so we can add what up though straight to the inner text like that. What up though to the inner text, and let's see what happens when the page loads. So now, bang, what up though? We got our H1 to say what up though. Remember, we was trying to do that. We didn't change the HTML at all. We did this in HTML just a few seconds or a few minutes ago. You rewind. But now you fast forward back to this part, you see that this H1 is still empty in the way that we added the HTML to it dynamically. We added this dynamically. The way that we added this dynamically is through JavaScript. And through JavaScript, we're going to be able to do a lot more things. Okay, that was really cool, right? Let me show you, once again, abstract JavaScript. So I'm going to move to this iPad screen just to show you what I did one more time with the query selector. So we had our HTML page right here. We got our HTML page right there, right? HTML, cool. And let's say there is this H1 tag on the HTML page. Cool. Well, now I have my JavaScript page over here, JS. What I'm going to do is create a variable. Creating variables is any programming language. You can do that in JavaScript. So we're going to do that. Create a variable. So and we're going to call this H1L with an M. So basically, let H1 element equals, and I didn't set it equal to anything, but what did we set it equal to? We set it equal to document.query selector, and then we pass in H1. So this document, let's break this down again. Document points here. Then we told the document to query select. We said query selector, and then we passed in H1. So we told the document, we referring to the document. We know what the document is. The document is a reference to our H1 or our HTML, and the way that we got that reference is from the HTML. Like, the HTML is the reason that we have the reference, because in the HTML we said add the assets that basically the index.html or index.js file. And so basically, if this index.js file is added to any HTML page, it's going to do a document.query selector and grab the H1 elements from the from the whatever page is loaded on. So that's what the document refers to. And then the query selector, all documents have query selectors. Any document can search it. So you can always say document.query selector. And if you know what the query selector is, here we go, H1. Now you're telling the document to search for that query selector. So I'm coming back here, and we got here, we saying document, I see you right here, document. I got you, document. This is you. Now I'm going to tell you to perform this action on yourself. And that action is going to basically be searching for this H1 attribute. So what happens is now the document comes here, searches for H1, finds the H1 right there, and then what it does is it comes back and stores that reference into the H1 element. Just as document is pointing to the whole document, now we got H1 element pointing to a specific H1 element inside the HTML document. Cool. So now that we got our specific H1 element, we got H1L right here, we can use this thing called the dot operator. And the dot operator allows us to see our I call them actions, and I call them properties / attributes. Now you might see action says methods or class functions or something like that. But if you think of it as an action, this is doing something, and then a property, this is describing it. You kind of get it in the way of, you can kind of think about it as a human. A human has actions and it has properties. We perform things, and we have eternal states. We have different internal states. We have physical states. We have mental states. We have all these different states that are our properties and that describe us. And then we have actions that we perform on these properties. So let's say, for me, my birthday is or I'm 24, and when my birthday comes around, there's this action that we naturally in our head produce, which is called increase age. And so that action is, I'm going to move from 24 to 25. And so in code, we would write that. We would say, okay, perform action, or we create an action, and that action would be like have birthday or something. And then so we would, when the birthday came around, we would fire that action off, and that have birthday action would basically just increase my birthday, increase my age, which is a property. My age is the property, so I would say Nate.age, and that would be my age, right? Nate.age would be the property, and then Nate.have birthday would be the action, and all this action would do is just increment my age. So the action and the properties typically go hand in hand, and you kind of think about it as a human. So that's my way of breaking that down. So we got h1 element, and now we can say dot inner text. And so I showed you what the inner text was. We can set the inner text to what up though, and now it automatically changes that fast. Basically, JavaScript is updating almost like every other millisecond in your browser. So it's going to be processing things really, really quickly. And that's why when the page first loaded, you didn't really, when the page first loaded, you didn't see blank and then it say what up though. It just said what up though because it just processed it very, very quickly. So that's pretty much the point of that's pretty much the point of what would you call this? That's pretty much the point of JavaScript, like the beginning part of JavaScript, like the hard part of JavaScript is pretty much understanding that you're grabbing elements from the HTML, and then you're manipulating those elements. You saw that we manipulated the HTML content, but what you will see is that we can also manipulate the CSS, and that most of the time, like animations are just manipulating the CSS with JavaScript over a certain time period. Or once a user clicks a button, we can perform certain actions because we have a reference to that button, and then we can set up some type of listeners that say, when this button is clicked, you see, we have this, let's go back real quick. We have this H1 element right here, and I can say, well, when that H1 element is clicked, I need some type of actions to perform. With JavaScript, we can now define those different actions. And over these next few videos, I'm going to introduce you to how we can even start getting in terms of setting stuff up like that, because you need to understand JavaScript syntax. Like JavaScript syntax goes back to programmer syntax. So before you can even understand JavaScript syntax, you kind of gotta get an introduction to what is programming to begin with, like what is like a computer and all of that other stuff and how it works together. And so I'm gonna give a quick overview of that in the next video, and then start talking about variables and start talking about data types and all that other stuff, functions and logic statements and all that stuff we're gonna get into in this channel with JavaScript. So that we can then take that knowledge and bring it back to grabbing things from grabbing references from the HTML and then manipulating it based upon however we need it to be manipulated. So thank you for coming through. Thank you for watching this video. First JavaScript video. Tap in, let me know how it was. Did you understand it? Did you like the reference I gave to humans and all of that? Like, let me know. Tap in with me. Fucks with y'all. Peace.